1853, the celebrated American columnist Walter Winchell wrote in his famous diary that here in London there was nothing better than the London nightlife, particularly for nightlife after dark, as he described it. He had found as what he also pointed out his utopia, somewhere where you could have a floor show at 8:30, 11:30 and then go on dancing right through until 2 a.m, sometimes even later, surrounded by, as he pointed out, lauded aristocrats, royals, gangsters and all sorts of London's seedy underworld, of which apparently he found fascinating. Now literally just around the corner from where I'm standing now was one of the most famous late night clubs, and naturally it featured not just one but two royals who were very frequent visitors to this celebrated nightclub land spot. What are we talking about? As ever, let me explain. The club was sort of, well, very appealing to many different people, not just because of the darker underworld attached to that, you know, the sort of gangsters, the craze later on, things like that, but literally what went on behind closed doors. The man who ran the Astor Club was Bertie Green, and he was absolutely desperate to get one royal to that club. That royal wasn't the one that you would imagine, but none other than, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, and he duly obliged, but making sure that there was a full, literally, ban on all photography. So Bertie Green really couldn't do much about getting some publicity with the fact that Prince Philip had been in attendance, not just on one occasion, but on two occasions. Now, where it gets more interesting was, Bertie was a man, shall we say, that you wouldn't really want to cross. He was one of those people, without a doubt, that really ruled the club with a rod of iron. In 1955, the celebrated singer Dame Shirley Bassey was appearing there, and it was here that the impresario Jack Hilton, another friend of the royals, saw her performing for the very first time and was able to escalate her to become a superstar at the nearby Adelphi Theatre. But Bertie Green was kind of furious. He didn't like the fact that his stars were being snatched, so he decided to do something about it. Princess Margaret was never truly far away, because Bertie Green was a very, very demanding character, you know. I mean, everybody who worked for him knew it. Everybody was literally terrified of him because he literally ruled the underworld long before the craze. And what was interesting was he knew that having, say, an association with royalty particularly cast your mind back in the early 1950s. It wasn't called nightlife then, it was called cafe society. And Princess Margaret had really thrown herself into that world, seemingly without too much care or distraction. Her real reason was the fact that she felt after the war she'd been repressed and wanted to make sure that she could live life to the full. She didn't have the constraints, of course, of her older sister, Queen Elizabeth. And if you think the stories about Meghan and Harry were very difficult to deal with, imagine exactly what the Queen Mother and the Queen had to deal with Princess Margaret on a regular basis. Like this, the evening started off like any other evening for the very young and beautiful Princess Margaret. There she was, you know, literally wanting to live life to the full, and as I say, not really have any constraints. As ever, she was getting ready to go out from Kensington Palace. Nobody really knew where the evening would land. You know, she didn't necessarily make plans, but her and her girlfriends at the time had decided upon the Astor Club. She arrived at the club around about 10 p.m. and more importantly was a little, shall we say, refreshed, as people remembered on that particular occasion. Now there's nothing wrong with that, you know, she was smoking, drinking, dancing, laughing away, and although they had an official club photographer, nobody was allowed to take any pictures of Princess Margaret, but people did. And this was very difficult, you know, sort of difficult times, because obviously the owner Bertie Green knew the value of this. Now the act that night at 11 p.m, the floor show, was none other than a celebrated coloured vocal group called the Deep River Boys. They had already enjoyed phenomenal success on the variety halls up and down the United Kingdom and across the rest of the world. Princess Margaret was utterly enamoured with their sound, their slick choreography and their vocal close harmonies, so much so she was whooping with delight after each and every song, creating something, some people suggested, as a bit of a scene. What followed, though, was worse. Some suggested that this was a scandal that was well and truly covered up. You see, this was simply a no-no way back in the 1950s, particularly the early 1950s. At the end of the set of the wonderful group, the Deep River Boys, and they were, if you haven't checked them out, listen to their harmonies, you can understand why they were incredibly popular. Well, Princess Margaret naturally wanted to meet them, and as I said, a little bit, shall we say, refreshed, to say the least. Now, what followed was that she was a little bit, shall we say, out of control, and not only that, was seen with a glass, cigarettes, and kissing individual members of the group. Nothing wrong in today's society, but a shocking no-no in that particular period, particularly, of course, of a senior royal, if you get the picture. Those pictures had to be killed, because if they found their way literally into the media, that could have resulted in all sorts of bad press and yet another headache for our wonderful monarch. You can understand now why she wanted to keep a close control on her. But you see, apparently Princess Margaret didn't see what was wrong with it. As far as she was concerned, she was having a night out, it was fun, and what truly was the problem? Many people would agree, but different times and different strokes and folks and all that sort of stuff. So that particular story really could have been a major scandal. And to this day, nobody actually knows where the pictures ended up. Apparently, they could still be around somewhere. The people who were involved with Bertie Green's club apparently took the negatives and the masters and gave them over to the security at Buckingham Palace. Imagine that happening today. Another royal connection was Lord Patrick Lichfield, cousin of the Queen, an ex-guard officer and fashionable photographer, who was often also seen at the club in the early 1960s. Another royal personage linked with the Astor was the very young King Hussein of Jordan, who Bertie Green claimed as his friend. Hussein was supposed to have fallen in love with the equally young hostess, Helena Morris. Because of Miss Morris, who was Jewish, the rumours of the affair, including the rumours that she was also expecting a child by the King, threatened to cause a crisis for the King. Green appeared on television and defended King Hussein, flatly denying all the rumours, and he dismissed Miss Morris when the newspapers caught wind of the alleged affair. You can see Walter Winchell was right about exactly the exoticness of what went on behind, well, closed doors after dark in the very heart of London. There you have a senior royal canoodling with, some might say at that particular time, the wrong type of people, and of course a celebrated king with a nightclub hostess. Now, where have we heard all of those stories before? Today, of course, in the world of social media, you wouldn't be able to contain it, would you? The Astor Club, like so many clubs, fell out of favour in the early 1970s, but the memories for many simply live on. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.